Hello, Internet! Welcome to episode 224 of the Assorted Calibers Podcast, the second-minute podcast that is sure to be a wild time. I'm Weer'd, is the very bestest hostess in the red hellscape of Florida, Aaron Poet! How are you doing, Aaron?
Wild time?
224 Wild. It's that weird AR cartridge that splits the difference between 5.56 and 223.
It's a hipster round. Got it.
It is. I couldn't
Get
resist.
off my lawn.
After episode 223, I'm like, 224, let's do 224.
Get off my lawn, you whippersnapper.
I don't have anything chambered in it. I'm a 308 man.
Continuing the theme, I ache like an old person. And, when I say that, most of the time people ask, well, what did you do? And, well, okay, I did have to repeatedly lift a 20-pound battery as part of my blue-collar prepping article. Check it out, bluecollarprepping.blogspot.com. I'm talking about battery backup and not really off-grid, but in case we lose power, so I can run my CPAP for, several nights at a time. It's a very good article, I think. And so it would be like, okay, I'm writing. What does this thing? I got to pick it up and look at it because I don't have a place where I can put it at eye level. And so after several times of picking it up and putting it down, it's like, I hurt now. But, next year I'm going to be a certain benchmark age. And unfortunately, I just sort of wake up stiff and sore. Sleep, the one thing I was good at. And then it's like, oh no, I hurt from sleeping. Ah!
Oh, the age of sleep injury.
I mean, I'm not at sleep injury yet, thankfully, but it's more sleep inconvenience. No, I don't know. It's more than an inconvenience, but less than an injury. So, yeah, that's how I'm doing. I'm very proud of, I'm feeling a bit more productive. I'm making myself work. I'm not doing NaNoWriMo National Novel Writing Month because I know me, and I know that I won't be able to keep to the schedule. And then when November ends and I haven't written a novel, I will beat myself up. And so this seems self-defeating. But I still kind of want to do something, and I've been kicking myself for not writing more. And so my not really NaNoWriMo is I'm going to make a concerted effort to write a blog post at least 5 times a week. And it's been going better than I feared, but not as good as I hoped. But still, it's like, okay, I'm churning things out. Maybe I can actually force myself back into the writing groove. So there's that. And I have just, in general, been avoiding a lot of the election because you mentioned the deep red hell of Florida. And so you see that? That's me not touching it.
I just wanted to quote specifically that, and I don't even remember which news article, which news agency did that, but referred to Florida as a deep red hellscape, and I just thought that was so hilarious. And since Florida voted themselves into that, it seems like everybody that I know in Florida is all like, hells yeah. So I decided I mixed up the intro a little bit because I had a couple of goofy ideas, and that's as good as it gets. I am also sore, but thankfully I have a good reason for it, which is my daughter. Well, I got a text message just one afternoon saying, "Would you like a swing set for your daughter?" When my daughter was like 2, maybe 3, and I said, "Yeah, that sounds actually great." I had a swing hanging from my apple tree, and that was what we had, and so it was one of those like, yeah. And so we went, and it was my next door neighbor was having a beer with the neighbor 2 doors down, and he had a step 2 swing set. For those who have been around, they've seen it's the big plastic swing set that are very, very common, and had that in his backyard, and he had 2 boys that were, on the older side at this point in time, and so it was one of those, they're way too big for this thing, and it's taking up a huge chunk of my yard, and you've got a young daughter. Would you like it? Yes. And so the 3 of us all picked it up whole and just moved it and set it up, and I had to get a couple of new parts and things like that, and then it was good. And hilariously enough, they said they had gotten it from somebody else, and I believe they had bought it new. And now my daughter is older, and even though she still kind of likes it, and will still occasionally do some stuff on it, but she's way too big for it. So we bought her a bunch of gymnastics equipment that we could set up in the backyard, and now she's like, okay, this scratches the itch that I was looking for.
When you say she's too big for it, do you mean she is physically too large, or do you mean she's too grown up for it?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
But mostly physically too large. Yeah. It's
okay.
It is a small child swing set, and she is actually quite tall. And so, she doesn't really get it's very hard for her, even with the swings cranked way up, it's very hard for her to get any sort of serious amount of swinging. And the thing rocks like crazy because of her weight and all that. So instead,
she's either going to break it or herself.
Correct. So,
okay.
Yep. So there's the actual person that lives right next door to that guy actually has some kids that are smaller than my daughter. And I said, hey, would you guys be interested in this? They said, sure. And so finally we took it apart and brought it over. And so I was carrying a giant swing set across the street. And so I am sore, and that is why. And I have been slacking off on weightlifting. And if I had been doing my weightlifting, maybe I wouldn't be sore, but I am.
So you skipped leg day is what you're saying?
Arm day.
And
arm day is the more important. The leg day is fine. I've been still walking a ton, so actually my legs feel fine. But yeah, my arms are killing me.
Okay.
But I was happy to see that it went on, and we were laughing about the fact that it's a plastic swing set, and this thing is, God, it might be close to 20 years old, and but it's still rocking solid, and it's one of those as we were carrying it, I'm like, the reason why this is probably not completely falling apart is because it's a swing
the rust
set.
Is holding it together. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I mean it does have some rust on it, but nothing serious. But I think it's one of those because it was designed by the lawyers. Because God forbid a husky 10-year-old decides to start playing on it, and just the whole thing collapses and hurts him. It would be not a good thing. So they actually did design these things to last. So it lives on, and now it's their hot potato to hold, and they will have to go through my trauma of oh man, if somebody doesn't take this, we're gonna have to cut this up with the Sawzall and pay someone to haul it away. So there, the joys of swing set.
Well, I mean, I suppose worst case scenario is you could go full on Wicked Witch and convert it into a grill in a Dutch oven.
Except it's plastic. But yes. Oh, Aaron.
Yeah, I'm not making that up. I've actually seen it. Although, yes, it is metal. But yeah, there's someone who, I guess their kid grew up, and so they just took the frame, and then they removed the swings and the whatever, and so now they've got a hanging Dutch oven, and then looks like, I don't know if they converted the swing. It looks very swing-like. But yeah, now that's a hanging grill.
That is really cool.
It looks really cool, but the first time I saw it, it was captioned like a meme, and it was something like, for crying out loud, Wiccans, we're trying to get away from the whole we eat children thing, and then you do this.
And I'm seeing there's a little cantilever off to the side. I can't really tell what that's trying to do.
That may be where the slide was.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know, maybe they've got it for hang on a rack of ribs or something. I don't know.
I don't know, but that is a very, very cool cooking setup. That is hilarious. But yeah, no, you get a good fire going on because the legs of this swing set are solid plastic, and so yeah, you get that good. It'll get real sad real fast. Or if you've ever seen the people that had like the barbecue grill on their deck right up against the side of the house, and then they go from the wood siding to the vinyl siding.
Oh dear.
And then they have a very wrinkly, sad side of the house.
I mean, no, I've never seen that, but I can imagine the horror.
Yeah. It happens. I actually know several people who have done that by accident. All right, well, so we go towards that third rail that is the election.
Yeah, I suppose so. Speaking of an accident, you know what? I'm just going to say Stacey Abrams. I don't like her. I don't like her for a variety of reasons. I don't like her personality. But I think the main reason I don't like her, and I'm sure it's the main reason you don't like her and our listeners don't like her, is that she is so very stridently pro-gun control, pro-gun prohibition, anti-Second Amendment. Mm-hmm. And she lost really, really badly.
She lost so badly that she's admitted that she's lost. I don't think she ever even gave a concession speech her last attempt to run for governor.
I mean, I think she lost by like 7 or 8%.
I believe something like that.
And so, dear listeners, you may be wondering why this is relevant, why we are bringing this up. Well, we bring it up as a compare and contrast because, as you probably know, there is a runoff election for senator in Georgia between Raphael Warnock and Herschel Walker. And really, the main difference between Warnock's campaign and Stacey Abrams' campaign is that Abrams was very, very anti-Second Amendment in her messaging, and Warnock didn't say anything about it. And there is an article in Bearing Arms by our well, he's my friend. I don't know if he's your friend, Weer'd. Tom Knighton.
Oh, no, I know Tom. He's been on the show.
Sometimes he goes by Tank Knighton. He identifies as a Merkava tank. I can make that joke. So anyway, he's got this article here, and he says, so Warnock very carefully didn't say anything about guns. There was, in fact, nothing about gun control on his campaign site and website, and he didn't say anything about it during the election, whereas Stacey Abrams was all about this. And I do want to point out that this is in a state that just this year passed constitutional carry. You know, Georgia is very pro-Second Amendment. You can't get much more pro-Second Amendment than passing constitutional carry for your state. And so she waltzes in with a very strong message of, well, among other things, repeal the constitutional carry in the state, and she gets shot down. Whereas Warnock kept very quiet about it, and this race is so close, it's like less than a percentage point, and so they're going to have a runoff. And so, like Weer'd said, at least in some states, gun control is still a third rail.
Mm-hmm. And while we're talking about people losing hard, another person that lost very, very hard who also talked about gun control was one Robert Francis. He's got a nickname. I forget what it is. O'Rourke. And he also campaigned. Well, he campaigned on gun control and against gun control, and he kind of went back and forth quite a bit. And
didn't he at one point say he was for the Second Amendment, just sort of a token thing, and we mocked him for it?
Yeah. He went. It seemed to be very, very briefly that he says he wasn't taking anybody's guns away, and he wasn't anti-gun, and he wasn't for any gun control, and then and then it started hurting him physically, so he had to stop and started talking about wanting to ban guns again in Texas.
But yeah, he lost really badly. He lost by 11%, or very close to 1 million votes.
Yes, it was brutal and savage, and hopefully he'll try it again. But
he's like a 3-time loser at this point, isn't he? Because he ran for president, he ran for governor, and I don't know, did he run for Senate?
He ran for Senate against Ted Cruz, and that was his most successful race. Well, his most successful. He was also I believe, state House of Representatives in Texas. He did hold, and I think it was only for one term. I
mean, really, you would think that if he really wanted to get elected to some sort of public office, he would run for either state or federal representative in a deep blue district like Austin.
Or mayor of Austin, actually, probably would be a decent fit for him. I mean, that would be all he want. He could, he could bring his punk band with him and all sorts of weird Austin stuff that he does, because he is the Austin, Texas of Texas politicians.
I mean, if he'd done that first, he might have had a chance. But I think at this point, being 0 for 3, well, do you think his political career is over? I hope it is, but I don't know if you think it is.
All I can think of is Dennis Kucinich. Dennis Kucinich sure did love to run and lose. So and Beto may be like that. He may not be here for the hunting. I don't know. And also, it's, to be fair, he got a pile of money thrown at him from out-of-state donors, and we all know that while that money does get used for various campaign things, there is a little bit of trickle-down economics that happens. And so, yeah, he may keep going until the money runs out. I don't know. But this was a demoralizing and humiliating defeat for Mr. Robert Francis. And so, yeah, we will see what he does.
And it couldn't have happened to a nicer person. Hell yeah, we're going to take your AR-15.
I'll throw that clip in there. Just so everyone can hear it all over again, because I got it in my little folder of sound clips, because I'm always going to keep that very close to my heart.
Hell yes, we're going to take your AR-15, your AK-47. We're not going to allow it to be used against our fellow Americans anymore.
Yeah, so he's the one that finally broke the silence on the nobody wants to take your guns. Nobody's coming for your guns. And then he said it, and then Biden said it, and they're now being open about it. And the people that kept calling us crazy conspiracy theorists haven't apologized. So the other interesting angle on this is there was a couple of ballot initiatives thrown in, and we will start. We talked about this in the.
Can you say that word again, please?
Ballot initiatives.
Okay, you said it right this time.
What did I say the last time?
I'm not entirely sure, but I felt like you added an extra syllable.
I mean, we'll take as many as we get. I get paid by the syllable, as all housewives do. So the voters in Iowa had one where they actually amended their constitution to put the right to keep and bear arms into their constitution. And of course, we talked about this in the round table because it was noted that a couple of anti-gun groups were wringing their hands at this, saying, oh, this is terrible and frightening and horrible, except for these are also the exact same people that are ignoring the NYSERPA v. Bruin decision. So there's a little bit of irony there.
One of the things that I really liked, and I might have missed it during the round table, is that the Iowa Constitution specifies that it's an individual right. So none of this nonsense about how the right to keep and bear arms is collective and it has to do with being in a militia and things like that. It's like, no, it applies to every single person individually. It's like, yes, I like that. Good.
As far as I know, I did a little bit of research on it and did find that there are other groups that list that talk about collective rights. I had only heard it in the context of gun control and essentially trying to say that the Second Amendment means absolutely nothing. But there are some other groups that use it as well. But as far as I know, at least in the United States, there may be other countries that have collective rights, but
we don't care about them because they aren't
we don't
us.
care about them, and that they don't apply. They can do whatever they want so long as they do it far, far away from us. But in the United States, as far as I know, there is nothing that is a collective right. It is either an individual right or it does not exist. I've heard some talk. Actually, the one that I have heard is some talk on the First Amendment applying to corporations and other groups. Though I would still argue that they're still people. There's still a board of directors that is deciding on the statement that such and such company is going to make. So I don't think it is a collective right. And also still the people in that company still have the right to speak out and say, yeah, the company may be in favor of this, but I'm in favor of that.
Well, I think part of that was a legal shield whereby you couldn't have some sleazy lawmaker going, well, you personally have the right to say what you want, but your corporation is... Your corporation does not have those same specific rights because those rights apply to people and you're advertising as part of a corporation and blah, 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 blah. I think that's what prompted the legal decision that states that corporations are technically people when it comes to rights. See, we are deep in the weeds, listeners. I didn't come prepared for this, which is why I'm kind of mumbling and pulling it out of my rear end.
I don't think the listeners care either. I just wanted to point out the fact that this collective rights thing is one of those. It is very thin. Like I went on a little bit of a wiki dive when talking about it with a friend of ours, and I'm like, is this a thing? Did this get invented by the anti-gunners just as a Hail Mary after? Because I didn't even hear about it until the run up to Heller versus DC, and in fact, it had predated that, and for causes that weren't Second Amendment related. So they picked it up from other groups. But either way, it is not a serious thing. It is not a thing as far as in the United States goes exists. And so yeah, when you hear somebody say collective rights, you could just say, yeah, that isn't a thing that we do. Show me something else that is a collective right besides saying that, oh, so long as you're a member of the National Guard or the Army, then you could have a gun. And also show me a member of the Army or National Guard that can be issued an Altor. Because Oddball has one of those because he wanted one and he has the right to have one. But yet Private Schmuckatelli, he does not get to have one. He doesn't even get to have a handgun because we don't trust him with that. But Private Schmuckatelli, when he is off duty, can have as many guns as he wants.
As long as he's not on base.
Well, sometimes. I don't know what the rules are. But yes, as long as he's not on base.
I mean, okay, maybe he could have them in his quarters, but definitely not in the barracks, and you can't conceal carry, last I checked. That's only for MPs, but deep in the weeds now.
Deep in the weeds, So, boy, Aaron, those are some stupid rules on military bases that soldiers can't carry guns.
Indeed, they are weird. But you know what else is a stupid rule?
Is Oregon's Measure 114, which I believe is not officially called. It is going as right now the projected. We're recording this the Monday the 14th. The projected call is essentially 51 to 49, which is right on par with every anti-gun initiative in a deep blue anti-gun state, which is it passes by a bare minimum. And in that, and then of course in any other state, anti-gun initiatives go down hard. And may I add, actually, that I don't remember if the article that we have listed gave the percentage of which it went through, but the Iowa constitutional amendment went very, very strongly, and went strongly than many of the other races, which implied that people may have it had much more bipartisan support than any of the candidates running. Actually,
I have that right now, and this is it's according to the AP. It's on Google. If you just Google 2022 U.S. elections, and that amendment passed 62%. No, 65.2 to 34.8.
Oh, that's lovely.
So yes, overwhelmingly in favor.
So yes, so Iowans making sure that the entire world and any lawmakers within the state or outside the state know that the Second Amendment means what it goddamn says, passed resoundingly. Meanwhile, in deep blue anti-gun Oregon, their measure may not have passed. There may be, but I suspect it will pass. But it was by the thinnest of thin margins. It might not be quite as bad as the universal background check law that passed in Nevada, and then their attorney general looked at it and went, "This law is so poorly written, it can't go into effect, and therefore I am going to moot the referendum." But it passed by 150 votes. And then it got mooted, and even though it passed and went through, Michael Bloomberg did not come back and try again. He just simply abandoned that cause. And he
abandons a lot of things. He's a really sore loser.
He is. But I did hear, which was a little was that evidently there was almost no pro-gun money thrown at this race, which is pretty much across the board. Honestly, there really wasn't that much money thrown around. The NRA doesn't have that much money, and the other groups also don't have nearly as much as the NRA did in its glory years.
However, our friend Alan Gottlieb, head of the Second Amendment Foundation, has already written the first draft of his complaint upon the law. And they haven't submitted it yet because they're still adding plaintiffs to the suit. But, quote, "we'll be ready to pounce."
I'm trying to remember if it was this one or not, but essentially any anti-gun law or ballot initiative that is going around, the Second Amendment Foundation has at least a rough draft of their lawsuit written up, and just if it passes, they will then go over it with a fine-tooth comb before submitting it. But they're already primed and ready to go. Okay, cool, do it, we'll sue you, because and this is absolutely unconstitutional. There's no way that this is a permit to purchase, and it's limiting magazines, and it's hot garbage. And the police don't support it because they're like, "Oh, and we're going to do all this when?"
With what money?
Correct. Exactly.
I mean, one of the things in this article is that it's something like it'll cost $50 million to process all of these background checks and other things for the first 2 years.
And that.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was wrong. $55 million for the first 2 years, and then $50 million for each 2 years after that.
That will come out of the magical unicorn fart fund.
And of course, local governments, they say, would get up to $19.5 million annually from the permit fees. And of course, this is based on 300,000 applications a year, which could dry up. My guess is this is going to be a huge cash suck. And, well, one of two things. Either various local entities are just not going to do it because they don't have the money, because that's what a lot of local sheriffs are saying. We don't have the cash. It's not that we won't enforce it, it's that we can't. And so it'll fail, or possibly, and Oregon will jack up the price for these permits in order to make up the shortfall. Because right now, this permit to buy, I mean, it's kind of like a FOID, really. But right now, it's a very reasonable $65. But I really expect that's going to jump soon, because that's such an easy way to gatekeep and raise money for the state.
How much does the Illinois FOID cost? The Massachusetts one's $100.
I don't know. I don't live there. I will Google.
I'm almost there.
Oh my God, $10.
Wow. Look
I'm
at that.
shocked.
That I mean, you can hear the shock in my voice. I am. That is exceptionally reasonable. So yeah, but in Massachusetts it's $100. So I can see Oregon being more along the lines of Massachusetts no, instead of 60 we'll charge you 100. But of course comes the big problem. I remember I can't remember what the governor was, but there was the governor of New Hampshire said, "Oh, we're going to jack up the cost. It's I believe $10 for your concealed carry permit in the state for a resident, and it was $20 for a non-resident, which is of course exceptionally reasonable." And there's no like fingerprints or even a photograph. Like you just fill out the form and send a check, and so long as you pass a background check, in about 20 days you'll get a you'll get a permit back in the mail. And the governor decided, oh, I'm going to jack this up to, I think he jacked it up to $100 for it was still $10 for residents, but for non-residents it was $100. And I went, oh, I got a Florida permit that's good there, so yep, bye. And that leads into this angle is that several sheriffs have said in Oregon that they will refuse to enforce this rule because it passed. It may have passed. If it does pass, it's by a very, very slim margin. And as we have noted, it's going to be immediately challenged in a lawsuit, and it is also, you just have to read a little bit into how the law works to see that, yeah, this is not illegal. This is not going to pass constitutional muster. So they're just going to say, yeah, we're not going to waste our time with this. So there's a lot of people who will need this FOID card, for lack of a better word. I don't know what term they're going to be using for it. But they're just not going to get it. And nobody's going to be any the wiser so long as they don't try to buy a gun like in Portland.
Mm-hmm. One thing I do want to point out is that sheriffs in Oregon are elected. So what I'm saying is, well, I guess it would depend on the tenor of their particular county, but as we pointed out before, the majority of the counties in Oregon voted against it. It was just the really big urban ones for Portland and Salem and possibly Eugene. I'm not sure. The point being is that most of the sheriffs who say they're not going to enforce it, they aren't going to face any punishment for this because they can't be fired. They just have to be defeated in an election. And odds are really good that the people who vote for them would go, well, yes, good for you. You've earned my vote. So while I approve of the sheriffs doing this, this is, to a certain extent, a calculated political move as well.
I would agree with that, but I would still also go on the angle. I am a person who is opposed to the illegal alien sanctuary cities. I don't, and I am a bit conflicted by the recreational marijuana laws in states such as the state of Massachusetts, in the fact that it is illegal federally and federal law trumps state law. So therefore Massachusetts saying that, hey, yeah, you could buy and sell marijuana in this state. It doesn't work and you can still be arrested for it. And the same thing goes with the sanctuary of illegal immigrants into this country. They are in the country illegally, and that is under federal law. So it really doesn't matter what the state says. But at the same time, And it was actually Chris Cheng that totally like flipped me in a second with the pointing out the fact that the Second Amendment is part of the U.S. Constitution. It is federal law. So therefore, all of these laws, including this one, are, in essentially plain English, illegal. And so therefore, a sheriff saying, I am not going to enforce a law because the law, and again, the Second Amendment Foundation is suing because they are saying this law is illegal and it should never have been passed in the first place. It makes perfect sense. So I am all for this. And the fact that it is a calculated political move and the sheriffs are going to benefit from it, that's just gravy.
Well, I mean, there's nothing inherently wrong with it being a calculated political move. I just wanted to point that out.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that does it talking about election news. We can, I'll just say there's going to be a mag dump coming for supporters on Patreon where we're going to dive a little deeper into it and where I can use bad language because honestly speaking, a lot of the stuff about this election is very frustrating. So let us move on to some lighter fare. And here's a fun segment. Here's a fun segment intro. Super fan of the show, Tiny, has a reaction segment to super fan of the show, Xander, in a segment he simply titled The Dunning-Kruger Effect.
Hello, ACP land. How you doing? Tiny back here with another little segment. Maybe going to start a series of segments I'd like to call Deep Thoughts from the Land of Rocks and Cows. The other day I was driving down the road and saw a neighbor out in his field with a new piece of tillage equipment. And I caught in a chase to rabbit down the hole with a series of ideas that were brought about by seeing this new implement. Now you all don't know me all that well, but I'm kind of like Xander. And while I didn't grow up on a farm every day, my dad sold farm equipment to the day he died, a total of almost 40 years. Part of that job was also teaching farmers new ways of farming, like no-till, strip tilling, things that would help their land and make their land more fertile and productive. I also grew up helping out on my aunt and uncle's dairy farm. But back to the thought at hand. When I saw my neighbor working up his field with this new implement, my first thought was, that's not going to work. But then I stopped and had a flashback to an episode of ACP where Xander was commentating on how Jeremy Clarkson, star of Top Gear, The Grand Tour, and Clarkson Farm, was learning how to farm his land himself for the first time instead of hiring someone to custom farm it. I immediately thought, well, the soil and everything is different in the UK than in Michigan or even Minnesota. So how does Xander know what best practices are, let alone me judging my neighbor? And I got to thinking, if going just a few miles from one farm to another can completely change how you farm the land, and farmers worldwide like to criticize each other saying, that's not how you do it, maybe it's not just farming. Then I started thinking about life in general and how much strife there is in the world. And I got to thinking, maybe we're all suffering from Dunning-Kruger effect, as we're all living our own little lives. And we can't seem to agree on things because we all know just our own little lives and how we've lived them. So we can't really shift our perspective enough to see from someone's point of view. So to summarize,
when you tell somebody something, it depends on what part of the United States you're standing in as to just how dumb you are.
Have a good day and be kind to one another.
I really do enjoy everything Tiny has said to the show, and I hope he sends more. Tiny, send more.
This is where I show off my horrible memory and I go, he sent in more? I don't remember. I'm sorry.
It was a while back. He was his was the story of witnessing a car accident. I believe it was a fatal car accident.
Maybe. Oh, was this pre-COVID?
Yes.
Was it in the before times?
It was in the before times there.
Well, then I can't be expected to remember anything that happened in the before times, and I am exempted.
You are exempted, Aaron. It is all fine and good. But I gotta say this, he makes a very, very excellent point, because this is something we frequently see in politics and like local regulation. For Second Amendment things, you'll see a news report where a reporter who's probably based out of New York or LA asks somebody from the rest of America about some crime and going, was the gun registered? And if you're a gun nut, you will know that in the exception of places like New York or LA or Massachusetts, if you've got a gun and you wanted to register it, you really wouldn't have any means to do so. And so the idea of questioning of whether a gun is registered or talking about an unregistered firearm in most of the country is really just a bizarre term. There's also one where in the state of New Jersey, you are not allowed to pump your own gas.
And they get very upset if you try to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was about to say, yeah, if you've ever been from another state and pulled into a gas station in New Jersey, it's the exact same pumps. Like you will literally you will hand them your credit card and they will stick it in the machine and push all the buttons that you push in your gas pump. But you have to stay in your car because you can't touch that gas pump because I don't know what they claim. It's dangerous. I don't know.
Wasn't there another state that had something similar that then got repealed with lots of pearl clutching?
I'm trying to remember. There is one other state that either does or didn't allow you to pump your own gas. And I'm sure there was, because, again, in every state, I'll talk about another one. In Massachusetts was, and to a lesser extent still is, the only state in the union that required a police officer to direct traffic around a construction site if the construction site was anywhere near an open road. So in the event that they were repairing a sidewalk, they were digging up a water main or a gas main or something like that, there would need to be a uniformed police officer directing traffic around that. And they did eventually repeal it. Now it is just an option for somebody to do it, and some states or towns still do require it, and others don't. But people were saying like, oh, if it's just somebody from the construction site with like a flag, people are just going to drive right by them. They're not going to respect that. They only respect the uniform. And it's literally the only state. It's one of those, like, I grew up in Maine. Yeah, you just, not only is it just a construction worker directing traffic around the site, as general, it's usually the least able construction worker. It's usually like the wiry 16-year-old that's working there is the guy that's directing traffic, because he's too small and willowy to handle the jackhammer, and he's not certified to operate any of the earth movers. And so, but just people were just clutching of pearls on that. And another thing in Massachusetts, and this will ring more bells to everyone, because it seems like most states have a weird alcohol law in effect. And in Massachusetts, it is all alcoholic beverages need to be sold at a liquor store. And so, like, in the lobby of my grocery store, they put some walls up and a door, and now there's a liquor store inside my grocery store. You cannot get to it without going into the grocery store first, but it is an entirely separate entity. You buy your liquor and pay for it there, and they give you a receipt and a bag that are not the grocery store's receipt or bag, and you leave through the grocery store. And there was a ballot measure to allow, like, everyone to sell. I think there was only grocery stores, and people were clutching at pearls going, they're not going to just be grocery stores. Gas stations are going to buy like a bunch of bananas and call themselves a grocery store so they could sell beer. And I'm like, I only bought beer at gas stations. That's where you go to get beer, is you go to the gas station. But people just get clutching clears because you grow up in an area, you just assume that the whole rest of the world is like that, and that if you repeal your stupid local law, then it's going to be a great social experiment.
So while you were talking, I went to the Googles and I found there is another state that currently does not allow you to pump your own gas. Oregon.
I'm so glad you looked that up. Oregon. 'Tis a silly place.
Dun, 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 dun.
Believe it or not, the states that don't trust you to touch the gas pumps are also the states that are very, very upset that you may have a right to own a gun.
Yeah, and at least according to this one article, they say it's because gasoline is a dangerous substance, and therefore it's in the public's best interest for gas station employees to pump gas. And so it's safer for trained employees to ensure that people turn off the vehicle and no one is smoking around the filling stations. Apparently, you need to be a highly trained minimum wage worker in order to tell people to observe basic safety and exhibit common sense.
But, by the way, you think the person running the drive-thru at McDonald's doesn't give an F? Wait till you see the person running the gas pumps in New Jersey. that's where the person who burned out on humanity working at McDonald's went to work.
Oh God.
Especially if you step out and immediately start punching buttons and putting your credit card in the machine. They'll get so mad at you. Oh, but yeah, it's just it reminds me of the story of when I always joke to people about this. Is just a great little example of how stupid Massachusetts gun laws are. Is I swung by, it was on my way home from work, and I realized, oh, I'm almost out of pistol powder, and this shop's got a good supply of reloading components, and so I stopped by, and it went in there, grabbed, a keg of powder, tossed it on the counter. With my credit card, and the guy says, "Oh, I'm going to need to see your permit." And I went, "Oh yeah, ammunition and ammunition components. You need to show ID, or you need to show a FID or an LTC in the state of Massachusetts." And I went, "Oh," so I pulled that out and gave it to him. Thank you. He looked at it and gave it back to me. Ran my card, and away we went. And I tell that to people, and people go, "Well, you were buying gunpowder. I mean, that is dangerous. You do need to be careful with that." And I said, "That is correct." And then I drove across the street to the gas station, and I filled up my car with gasoline and never saw a living human being there. Just swiped my card at the pump and filled up and then drove on. So, yeah, we're weird about that. And of course, also, yeah, everybody everywhere else outside of Oregon and New Jersey is going, yeah, people just don't. They put a little sticker on the gas pumps that says no smoking, and that's good enough because it's not for the sake of the gas station. They're insured. It's so you don't burn up.
In his second segment on optics, David talks about radioactive materials and guttersnipes.
Hi, and welcome to Gun Lovers and Other Strangers. In this, the second installment in my series on the history and use of sights and optics on firearms, I'd like to talk about additional elements of iron sights as well as some of the lesser known or more unusual sights. First, I'll start with dots. The earliest iron sights were plain with no markings whatsoever. This changed fairly quickly to help increase visibility in low light or higher stress situations. Brass, gold, and ivory beads were brought over from shotguns and added to handgun and rifle front sights, which helped considerably. On pistols, these transformed into the dots we're more familiar with today. Rear sights initially got a simple line below the center of the notch, followed by an outline of the entire rear aperture. Later, the rear sight also got dots. To start the parade, there was a pair of them, one to either side of the rear sight opening. This is still the most common rear sight pattern today. But never ones for leaving well enough alone, the rear sight dots also went through a number of variations over the years, such as a single dot below the notch, which in use is lined up with the front sight dot, creating a figure-8 image, which also gives this sight pattern its name. In the lower dot position, triangles and diamond shapes are also used. Another example is a setup with a considerably larger front sight dot and a wide vertical line below the rear sight notch. In use, the dot is placed at the top of the line. This system is good for rapid sight acquisition at close range and is, unsurprisingly, called a lollipop sight. In addition to the different dot patterns and configurations, a variety of contrasting colors are also available. While the traditional sight marking color is white, dots have also been colored with red, orange, yellow, and green highlights. They've been set up both in all matching and contrasting color combinations. The pyramid sight system is an interesting diversion from traditional iron sights. In this style, the rear sight is a flat-topped triangle with highlights up the sides, and the front sight forms the top of the triangle. Imagine the Illuminati symbol on the back of a dollar bill as handgun sights, and you'll get the basic idea. Another less-known iron sight concept is the trench sight. One of the earliest appearances of this style was on the John Browning-designed FN Model 1910 pistol. The sight consists of a groove down the top of the slide with a slight narrowing at the rear and a small post at the front. A more refined version of this concept was patented in 1971 by Paris Theodore, a noted holster maker and developer of the ASP conversion of the Smith & Wesson Model 39 pistol. He called his invention the Guttersnipe sight. This sight was positioned from the back of the slide to the rear of the ejection port, or from the front of the ejection port to the muzzle. It consisted of a slot that narrowed both horizontally and vertically as it went forward. The interior of the slot was usually painted in contrasting colors, one for the bottom and another for the sides. This sight makes use of the vanishing point concept to draw the user's eye to a specific point. With practice, it can be quite effective for close-range snapshots. Since then, several other manufacturers have used these or similar designs, including Colt's New Agent, Caracol's Enhanced F pistol with Quick Sight, SIG on their P365 SAS, and Graham Combat with their Fast Sight. To help make any style of sight more visible, a number of different things have been tried over the years, including high-visibility fluorescent paints and light-activated luminescent coatings, both of which are still used today. The fluorescent paints require sufficient ambient light to see them, but are easier to pick up in low-light conditions or against a dark target backdrop. While the light-activated luminescent coatings do in fact glow in the dark, they must be regularly exposed to a light source to recharge them, as it were. Not necessarily optimal for use on a concealed carry handgun. Fiber optic inserts are a latter addition to the low-light iron sights family. In use, they gather light from all around the outside of the filament and redirect it to the open ends. This results in a well-illuminated sight picture even with poor outside illumination. The fiber optic strands come in several colors and are usually user replaceable without too much trouble. The high bar of sight illumination employs small glass vials of tritium set into the body of the sights themselves. Tritium is a radioactive isotope of hydrogen, and as it decays, it releases light. The National Institute of Standards and Technology lists the decay rate of tritium as 4,500 plus minus 8 days, or around 12.25 years. While fairly robust, it is possible to crack one of the vials through rough treatment. So there you have it, probably more than you ever wanted to know about iron sights. In my next segment on this topic, I plan to get more into the details of magnified optics. Good luck and safe shooting.
Now, the most interesting thing, which I've been avoiding mentioning, is what's called a Guttersnipe sight.
That about wraps up this segment. If you have any questions for me or suggestions for future segments or a comment on a past segment, please post them on the Assorted Calibers Podcast Facebook or MeWe pages, and Aaron or Weer'd will make sure I see them. I'm also a contributor on the Blue Collar Prepping blog, which can be found at bluecollarprepping.blogspot.com. We're always looking for people interested in submitting posts to the blog, so please check out the site. Finally, I'm also a published author, and books with my stories can be found on Amazon under the name Brenna Bock. That's BrenaBock. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. I'm David, and this is Gun Lovers and Other Strangers.
Okay, I gotta say it. David's pronunciation of tritium has me questioning his pronunciation of the partridge sights. Maybe it was just a typo and they are partridge sights.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't worry about it. I mean, after all, this is a guy who pronounces interior as...
The interior of the slot.
Interer.
Well, to be fair, David is an author and is a heavy reader, and you get that. There's actually a talk show host, Howie Carr, who he got his start as a newspaper reporter, and so he is very, very well read and spends a lot of time writing, and so he will mispronounce words in the most alarming ways because he has read them and all the letters are in the right place, but all the accents are on the wrong syllable.
Did you intentionally put a little spin on word? Because you kind of threw in a thing to make it sound a little bit like weird.
Yeah, I mean, I'm generally not good at talking.
But you do it so often.
I know, isn't it hilarious?
All right, so as a result of this, I did a little bit of an etymological dive.
You say that just because it bugs me.
Okay, so it does depend on the nationality, although it's not a U.S. versus U.K. difference, because according to the Cambridge Dictionary, they've got a how to pronounce, and both the U.K. and the U.S. pronunciation is tritium. I believe it's maybe French. I don't remember now, but it is... Some languages do make it sound like tree, tritium. I think it was French that did it, although it might have been Dutch. I don't remember. So, well, I mean, remember, David is the one who brought up the whole carbine versus carbine versus carbon thing. So, I wouldn't stress over much. Weird.
Yeah, he does prefer British pronunciations when in doubt. And,
yeah, but the thing is, this isn't even British.
No, it is not. No, it is not. Yeah, and for those that don't know, tritium is in fact using the word tri in it because it is hydrogen that has the prerequisite proton in the nucleus, and then it has 2 neutrons in it, and there is an isotope of hydrogen called deuterium, which is also referred to as deuterated water. Is also referred to as deuterium, is a hydrogen that has a proton and a neutron, so 2 molecular weight in the atom.
I believe it's also referred to as heavy water.
Yes. Yep. And I mean and tritium water would also be heavy water. Yeah, because it's heavier.
By a tiny bit, but yes.
Yeah. I mean, I imagine actually if you had enough of it, it probably would form an interface. The heavy stuff would sink to the bottom, but also at the same time, it is just mixed in with regular water. So it's not like your swimming pool has a whole bunch of tritium and deuterium all the way at the bottom of it because it's just sitting there. But again, you have a pump. I don't know. Now I'm way over my skis. Let's talk about something I do know. I do know that I've got a Colt 1908 Vest Pocket 25. And that one has the trench sight, and it is a very, very difficult sight to use. It is barely there. But that is being said that the front blade that's on the far end of the gutter is very, very, very fine and black. And so if you're shooting on any sort of dark target, it just disappears. That being said, it's probably not too different than how many revolvers will have the trench in the top strap ground in instead of having a separate rear sight block and going through. So, and I think those are just fine to use as far as I'm concerned.
Why I was quiet, because I was looking to see which came first, the Guttersnipe sight or the derogatory term for Guttersnipe as an urchin. And I can't find when Paris, what's his name,
It'd be the
invented
70s.
The 1970s?
1970s, yes.
Okay, in which case the insult came first.
Yes.
Because that appeared in the 1850s.
Yeah, no, Paris, what was his last name? It's already lost me. I was about to definitively say the name, and I realized the name that I was thinking was Paris White, who's a porn star.
Paris Theodore.
Paris Theodore, yes. Yeah, he was. I believe he was Israeli, And so, yeah.
I would not have guessed that at all from that name. Oh my goodness.
But yeah, he if you saw a picture of him, you would
Well, I just Googled him. No, it says he's American.
okay.
But you're right. He absolutely looks like a hard-boiled Mossad agent from like the 1970s.
Yeah, I think he had. I think he might have worked heavily with Mossad in hopes to like sell this gun, and I can't remember. He's got some tie to the Israelis, but either way, he strikes me as someone who is quite the salty dog in conversation. So the idea of him naming his sites after an insult it plays out beautifully. Yes, you've posted the picture of him with the cigarette in his mouth and the Mac 10 with the suppressor.
I mean, really, the only way he could look more like a New York City Jew, and there's nothing wrong with that, would be if he had an Uzi instead of a Mac 10.
That is correct. Oh, and he's got he looks like he's got a bunch of rings on his finger too, or maybe just a pinky ring. But either way, that is the face of a salty dog.
Oh yes,
that is the face of the. I would have interviewed him for ACP had he still been alive, and I would spend a lot of time editing it because there'd be some choice language that we'd have to move around.
The first ACP interview that has to be played during a mag dump.
Yes. No, I would have just cleaned it up. It would have been worth it. It probably would be. It wouldn't be quite as bad as when Ryan Machad interviewed Jeremy Posderick for, I believe he was doing This Week in Guns. I can't remember which show it was for that. But Jeremy is a Marine and speaks like a Marine, and I believe Ryan got tired sometime in the middle of the of editing, bleeping out all of the swears, that probably at least 30 or 40 of them got by.
So when you say Marine, you mean drops the F-bomb like it was a comma.
Yes. Sometimes it's the space bar. All right, moving on to our final segment. Matt brings us his fourth VR segment. And in this one, he talks about how, and more importantly, where you can get your VR gaming on.
Hi, Matt with Geeks, Gadgets, and Guns here for another virtual segment. And I thought this time we should cover play sources and gameplay. Now, most games you find for VR anymore kind of come in one of three categories. They are normally categorized as seated, standing, or room scale. Well, Weer'd was talking previously about not having enough room. That's kind of where the Oculus shines, because the Oculus can kind of use any room, any play space you have to work. You can set up the Oculus to work at a desk. You can have it set up to work as a couch. Or you can go full room scale. So you can have stationary setup where you just say, hey, I want to do stationary, and that kind of makes about a 3-foot circle around you. So you just do this little 3-foot circle, and it's pretty much trying to keep everything within arm's reach. And when you get to the edge of it, it's going to actually fade in something that kind of looks like the holodeck with a red ring around whatever is about to go through the edge of the Guardian. So you can set that up anywhere. But let's say you don't have a lot of place inside your house because, oh no, you've got the kids taking up what extra playroom you would have. You can literally, with the Quest, just set up, draw a Guardian on the floor, and go there. So you could do it in your living room, your family room, if you have any room. You could go even further if you really wanted to. Pull your car out of the garage, do it in your garage. Or as I like to do during the week, I go into my empty semi-trailer and just draw a line on the floor, create this play area, and then I can go and use as much or as little of that as I want. Now, when we say seated, that pretty much means, hey, you're like on a couch, on a chair, and you're in a seated position, and you do all the game world, all the controls from that location. Standing, you would do standing up, but you would like sit down, crouch, dodge, that kind of stuff. So pretty much your feet stay planted, but you go up, you can crouch, that kind of stuff. And then room scale means whatever the extent of your Guardian is, you are going to go and walk around that area and that is your play area. So you can walk, and you would move in the game world wherever you ended up walking to. That would be tracked as real movement and translated directly into the game, so you have no motion sickness or anything else like that. Combine that with teleporting, you get virtually unlimited play space, even if you only have 4 or 5 feet square, or some weird shape. They all work. You can do weird shapes. It doesn't matter. Now, for gameplay. To do gameplay, you're normally having a couple of different input methods. You have gamepad controllers, so like PlayStation, Xbox, some controller like that. Star Wars Squadrons actually supports it, so if you wanted to, you could have a joystick or do a full joystick HOTAS setup, which would be a joystick and a throttle. You can have that be your controller, and you're just in the virtual, so you're looking around inside the cockpit, and wherever you look, you're in the cockpit. That's seated play. And that game only really works for if you're staying seated in one location, but still, really kind of cool. Now, that would be gamepad standard controller. Then you have native VR controllers, which if you're to buy a HTC Vive, an Index, a Quest, anything like that, you're going to come with a controller for either hand that does motion tracking, that does it through a section of gimbals, IR, and a little of all the above, so it tracks motion, movement, angle, and pitch. So they will also have a trigger on there, and normally they'll have a grip section. So like on the Quest, it has a little grip below the trigger, so it acts as a secondary trigger that you normally will manipulate with your middle finger. And so let's say you want to grab something in the game, you use that to grab it. And then your trigger is normally used for a trigger. But that's also the most common selector in VR games. The trigger is basically your A button for those of you who do standard controlling. Now, the Oculus currently supports hand tracking. Most games don't support it, but there are 1 or 2 games where the Oculus cameras actually track your hands in the real world using just their cameras, and you have full hand manipulation with that, so you can actually go around, mix, and grab stuff in the virtual world using your real hands. Like I said, most games don't support that. It is pretty cool. Now, in order to actually get these games, there are really 2 different ways of doing it. There's the on-device rendering, which is basically what the Quest is, where the entire game and everything is self-contained on the headset itself. You have no wires, no cords, no nothing else. Then you have a rendering station, which would be like a PlayStation 4, a PlayStation 5, or a computer. Those you can do more graphics quality. You can do more intense games. But honestly, the Quest 2 has gotten so good, you can get darn near PC level quality directly on the device, and you don't have to do all the setup. You don't have to do all the connections. You don't have to run a wire. There are some things. There is, for the HTC, they have worked with a wireless solution to allow you to run the headset wirelessly. That works, and it really requires Wi-Fi. That's super, it requires dedicated hardware, basically. Then the Quest has 2 different ways it can do PC connected gaming. You have native running just the cord. It has to be a USB 3.0 cord because you need high data rates in order to do it. So you're limited to about 16 feet distance. Or they have AirLink. It's not 100% perfected yet, but with the advent of Wi-Fi 6E jumping to the 6 gigahertz band, which means you're going to have less interference, you have the possibility with the Quest 2 of being able to do wireless gameplay. It does work. It's still kind of in the experimental stage. You get a little bit of extra lag, but it is really nice to not have to have the wires running, the cords running, because when you have the wires, unless you go and get a system of pulleys and whatnot that you hook to the ceiling, you're going to start wrapping up in the cord pretty darn quick if you're running a wired system. But some of the most hardcore systems and hardcore games like Half-Life Alyx, which is still one of the best, that is PC rendered only. What's coming with the PlayStation VR 2? PS5 rendering only. So there are some limitations and there are some benefits of going both directions. Honestly, if you're just saying, hey, I want to try doing VR. I'm not sure how much I want to get into it. I don't want to spend a ton of money. Really, an Oculus Quest 2 is the way to go. It is the cheapest way to get in, and it still allows the ability to work with any VR game you buy on Steam. And it mostly works seamlessly. So if you have a gaming PC, you can hook up to that, but you don't have to. You can just buy through their store. It's the closest thing you have to like an Xbox or a PlayStation. You can just set up and go. And what I'll do for you guys is I'll put a little referral code that I'll provide to Weer'd in the links for the show notes. So if you actually want to check it out, you can use that link and you can get $30 in free software if you actually go through and buy a Quest 2 using that link. Not saying you have to. And we have Black Friday coming up, which means there's a ton of sales. But it is kind of the best way to get in. And yes, the price went up by $100. You can get the lowest end Quest. There are issues with the Quest. The headset's not the greatest. The headband is not the greatest on the headset. But it is still a great device, easy to use. And if you're not sure how much room you have, you could literally take it out to a park. You could take it up, set it in your backyard. You could set it up in your garage. You can set it up literally anywhere where you have a couple of free feet. That makes it so much easier to do. It's not that much of an investment in terms of setup and time. I end up finding I use that way more than my Index, even though I've got really cool stuff for the Index. The ability to set it up and play quickly and easily is a very massive improvement. But we'll come back in a few weeks and we'll have a few more segments. We'll talk about some great games to try, what you have to see with motion sickness, ways to deal with it, and a few other things. And of course, if you have any questions, why don't you send them on in to the Assorted Calibers Podcast, and I'm more than willing to cover those in a future update. Live long and prosper, y'all.
I loved thinking about Matt being away from home with his truck, but at least he can still play some sweet VR games inside his trailer. And he has told me that Beat Saber, he gets so much of a workout that he's played it inside his unheated trailer in Chicago in the wintertime without wearing a coat.
Dang.
Yeah. If you watch Beat Saber playthroughs on like YouTube, just type in Beat Saber into YouTube and you will see people doing that and realize that that is not someone mashing buttons on a controller. That is somebody moving their arms around. And you will quickly realize, oh, wow, that's you're going to get tuckered out after a while.
I really have nothing to add because I'm poor. But here's a really cool picture that I just found as the result of Googling Beat Saber.
Yes. Oh, that is a really
cool
you've
picture. Seen it before.
No, I haven't seen I've seen Beat Saber. I have not seen this particular picture and that particular model, and I'm enjoying it.
I thought you might.
She is a very talented lady.
And by talented, I mean she's got big boobies.
And she could crack a walnut between her ass cheeks.
But yes, I do have to admire the athleticism on that. It makes me wonder if she's like perhaps a gymnast.
Yeah, probably.
Because I mean, even very fit people, that's not a very natural pose for most people. It's very elegant looking, but most people can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really cool.
Yeah, and it all depends on where she's going. Like, did she take a running start to do that? Either way. Mm-hmm. Beat Saber, it's a good way to get your geek on and your exercise on. Which I, of course, find so ironic because there was always the flabby indoor kids that were the Nintendo geeks versus the jocks that were always just in amazing shape. Maybe someday it'll be the indoor kids are just tore up because I play Beat Saber 16 hours a day.
While you were out partying, I mastered the Beat Saber blade.
Oh, this is getting geeky, Aaron. Let's get out of here. It is time for us to thank each and every one of our listeners. But a very special thanks to our supporters on Patreon. To become a Patreon patron, go to patreon.com/Assorted Calibers Podcast to sign up. You guys can get an early release of the podcast, plus bonus content like the hilarious blooper reels There's the ACP film track, and we're going to be having a mag dump right off the bat here to talk about the election, because there's a lot to talk about, but it's not necessarily on the topic for this show.
Okay, I wasn't sure that you were done.
I felt like I was going to say more, and I realized there was no more.
Yeah, didn't it? Yeah. Also, please remember to rate us on Apple Podcasts, subscribe to us on the platform of your choice, and share the show with your friends, both online and off.
I got a blog. It's called Weer'dWorld.com, and I'm on Handgun Radio as well, on the Firearms Radio Network with some guy named Ryan who doesn't know how to use a computer.
And you can get more from me at Linktree/Aaron Paulette. That's linktree.ee. It's just for weird there. /Aaron Paulette, all one word.
I knew it was just for me. And thanks to Nate Spencer for our music.
So, I put the E in geek, which means Weer'd is just left with the and so's our podcast. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.